Okay, it is that time of year again to do a full statistical breakdown. We are going to be taking a look at all of the stats taken from all of the tier 1 games this year up to this point. Obviously, we've only got champs left, and after champs, I will be doing a couple different stats videos. Probably looking at like more archetype matchups on each map as well. But today, let's just do what we've kind of done before with all of the stage 2 data included, of course. We're going to start with the first 4 maps today. First one being Ascent. We'll do the other 3 and the overall data tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. But let's start off with Ascent, which is out of 224 comps. And here we've got, what we're going to do is the most played comp on each map will be the top one. And then kind of some variations of some different ways of playing the map, different archetypes that, maybe did pretty well or of note. So here, of course, we got the kind of most played meta comp here. But then you've got this, Fnatic comp. Right, with the Chamber Vice, which did pretty well, and you've also got this kind of Team Heretics double duelist comp as well, which did start to see a little bit more play during stage 2. If we move on to the archetypes, what I've done here, which is different to before, is I'm going to show you the old archetypes. So this is what we were last time I did a stats video, post Toronto, and I'm going to show you what's changed since then, right? So this was the old archetypes and this is the new archetypes. So if we just take a look at pick rate first, so this is the red bars first, you can for instance see that the meta comps were still very much the dominant comp. Then some double senti, double smokes, triple initiate, the double duelist not seeing so much. But if we compare that to what we see now, even though this bar is higher, it's because the thing on the left here is a bit lower, the number actually goes down, right? So the meta comps are making up less of the meta. The double senti comps are seeing an increase, the double smokes are seeing an increase, and the double duelist is also seeing a bit of an increase there as well. Right, so less meta comps, less old meta comps, more of kind of everything else, essentially, right? If you take a look at the win rates, so you can see back in the day, the old meta comps were actually still doing very well, right? They were 55% non-mirror win rate. It was like, this is the best way of playing the map. The double senti comps that we've seen before, which are often the deadlock cipher, they weren't doing so well. Neither were double smokes, neither was anything apart from double duelist. It was just basically those two, right? But now, flip it around, meta not doing so well. Double senti and double smokes actually heavy on the rise, and double duelist a big faller, right? So we've seen almost a flip of what we were earlier on in the season. Maybe that's because people figured out the correct comps, right? You saw the Fnatic comp here. Instead, you saw kind of the Nongshim Neon Viper version instead, making up some of this double smokes. So maybe people in these categories, the double senti, double smokes, basically just figured out better versions of it and got rewarded for doing that, right? If we take a look at the agents here, so this is all of the agents who either had a significant play rate or had at least 20 non-mirror games, and you can see their pick rate here. Again, this is in the brackets here of their pick rate is the change that we saw from kind of earlier doing it to now, right? So you can see like Omen up 2, Fade down 4, right? Not some big movers, but some other bigger movers, right? Someone like Sova obviously benefiting a lot from kind of the Teo nerf from the last time I did this. Of course, a lot more games have been played with the Teo nerf in, but Vice also, right? With the rise of kind of that Chamber, same for Chamber here as well, right? With the rise of kind of that Chamber Vice comp, and we're just seeing a bit more Vice. I think people have just figured out Vice might be a bit better on this map anyway. Seeing a big increase as well. In terms of the win rates, not really too much going on other than Chamber and Vice and that Fnatic comp, of course, doing pretty well. And Deadlock and that Cypher Deadlock, that version of the kind of double senti really not doing so well. Move on to Bind, which is out of 192 comps. Obviously, Bind rotating back in, and this was actually the most played comp, right? We actually had the double duelist be the most played comp. You can see here that the pick rates of kind of some of the more popular comps, because this was the second most popular comp as well, not that high. There was quite a lot of variety on Bind, a lot of different in and out changing things like that. I've also included this kind of no Viper comp down here at the bottom. You see that this double duelist comp actually did do pretty well overall. But let's talk about the archetypes. Obviously, we don't have old archetypes because Bind wasn't in the last time that I did this, so I didn't have that data. But here you've got the pick rates of different archetypes. So this I would call like the meta archetypes, right? In terms of, like this Sky comp here, right, would fit into this, no Sentinel with a Viper, making up the majority of the meta. Actually not doing that great. Double Senti, the rest of them not too particularly, super high. But in terms of the win rates, you can see double Senti, playing with no Viper with a Senti instead. So you're getting rid of Viper, putting a Senti into those comps. That did decently well. Double Duelist actually not doing too great, which kind of goes to show you that this comp did well. So if you played this comp for Double Duelist, it worked. If you played anything else, it probably didn't. And then Gen G comps is where you're playing both a Viper and a Center. You're playing Solo Initiator in those comps, and those did pretty well as well. Looking at the agents, what I find interesting about Bind, and this is not true really for really any other map, is you've got a lot of different options here, right? They all have varying degrees of pick rates, and apart from Raze, who obviously is good, and maybe Viper, but I'm not blowing your mind to tell you that Viper and Raze are pretty good on Bind, right? And everything else is kind of just like maybe one game above 50% or below, you know, 1 or 2 games above or below, really nothing like too crazy, really. And so, yeah, there's a lot of options on Bind, and it seems like they're all okay. Like, you can play most of them, and it probably is okay, right? Yeah, Raze is good on Bind, but am I really blowing your mind with that one? Basically, play what you want on Bind. It's probably at least okay, or at least has been for this year. Now let's flip ahead though to Corrode. Obviously, Corrode is all new data, right? The new map, of course, coming in at stage 2. And as you might expect with a new map, there was a lot of different comps, right? A lot of people playing their own stuff. This was the most played comp, Omen, Neon, Fade, Viper, Vice. But as you can see, it did terribly. It only won 4 of the 13 games that it played. Yeah, even though this was the most picked, it didn't do very well. And I've just given you some other options here of like, here's a double duelist comp with Neon Waylay. Here's a double Senti comp that like Talon were running, you know, with Deadlock Cypher. So a lot of different directions, of course, as you would expect on a new map. There was a lot of different stuff going on. Looking at some of the kind of archetypes that we saw, though, the most played was this kind of comp here that we saw with the Neon Viper Vice, right? So Solo Initiator, Solo Juice, Solo, double controller with a Senti, right? That was by far more than 50% the most played in terms of the archetypes. But as you can see, in terms of win rate, everything else actually was okay. Whether you're playing double Duelist, whether you're playing no Sentinel and double Smokes, double Senti, double Initiator, everything else did well because they all farmed the most popular thing. Which I think is quite an interesting thing, right? That the initial direction that most teams are going in did by far the worst. Now, I'm not sure if that's just because they're more used to playing against it, right? Because they were seeing it way more often. I don't know. Maybe this just isn't a good direction to go in on the map if, you know, plenty of other things were finding some success. But interestingly, none of them were finding like, you know, there's no one here that's like 80% like, wow, this really popped off. You know, so what you should play instead is still maybe a bit of a question and doesn't have necessarily a definitive answer. Looking at the agents here, this time I lowered the kind of non-mirror games to 10 so we could take a look at a couple more agents. But pick rate wise, let's take a look at that first, right? So Omen, you know, a dominant pick, a lot of Viper, a lot of Fade. Then in terms of the Sentis, it was quite mixed, right? There isn't really like a clear option for the Senti, and no Senti was an option as well. In terms of Duelist, Neon and Yoru, you know, Neon being a pretty popular pick as well. In terms of win rates, though, what I find interesting is, again, as we've kind of seen throughout this, is that the Viper Vice stuff, which is very strong on a lot of other maps, and, you know, is a good picks, didn't do well. Right, that didn't do that well at all. And you've got other things like, you know, the Cypher Deadlock with the double Senti, even, you know, double Initiators playing with KO, you know, tended to have just more success. And so this is all kind of telling a familiar story. This main idea didn't do that well. Let's move on to Haven, which saw 346 comps, the last map for today. And the most picked comp on Haven this whole year was actually the Fnatic ISO Yoru comp, which was played a very nice 69 times overall and made up 20%. Now, what we're not including here is kind of the old meta Breach, Sova, Neon stuff, right? That, between playing the Cypher version and the Killjoy version, did have significant pick rates themselves. But I thought we had other comps that we had to talk about that really popped off during Stage 2, because these two comps really weren't seeing that much play before this stage, right? Almost all of these picks are during Stage 2, but it's a lot of them. Right, like this comp, this Viper comp made by Gen G, or at least popularized by Gen G, popped off a lot and had a very good win rate as well. And this comp, the kind of double duelist, you know, replacing a Neon, obviously that's kind of, it kind of has replaced this ISO comp, right? This has kind of become the new way of playing double duelist on this map, but as you can see, it actually didn't do maybe as well as you would expect. Now, if we take a look at archetypes, again, this is quite interesting because you can see this is what we were on before, right? Which is a lot of the old meta stuff, and then quite a bit of the Fnatic stuff, and then not so much of anything else, right? But if you look at the new pick rates, the meta comes way down. Fnatic comp stays around the same, a lot more double smokes, a lot more double dive. And also, if you take a look at win rates, the meta comp didn't do very well. It still I mean, it was never good. I mean, we'll get to this in a second. But if you've watched these stats videos for a while, you'll know that this meta, Sova Breach, Neon, Sova Breach, Jet, whatever it is, they never do well. But you can see here that win rates of the others, like Fnatic, Double Smokes, really it was Double Senti, which was the one that was kind of, had the best win rate. Well, if you take a look at it now, Double Smokes, heavy riser, right? Big rise, 5%, going up to 58%. So again, it feels like someone found the right Double Smokes comp to play, and then it kind of popped off, right? Fnatic's still around the same. The double dive, did go up quite a bit. So again, kind of maybe finding that your Neon or whatever combo that is was probably a bit better than like the old Jet double duelist stuff that people were playing. But really the big riser was the double smokes. And if we take a look at the agents as well, again, in terms of the pick rates here, we are seeing a bit of a change, right? Obviously, again, Teo is kind of a bit of a black mark on this in terms of the pick rates, because obviously Teo has gone down quite significantly, right? But Breach also down pretty significantly. Cypher even down quite a bit as well. And I am attributing that to playing that specific Gen G comp where it is a Killjoy, but Vice also rose pretty big as well here. A lot less Jet, a lot more Neon in those double duelists, right? You're getting a lot of Neon in there. In terms of the win rates, as I said, double smokes with Viper popping off. It's a good direction to go in. It did very well, right? We have to again come to our regular Breach is terrible on Haven. The fact that there are still some teams playing Breach on Haven, despite every time I do this, literally every time. If you've watched these videos, these stats videos, if you've watched every single one, there's one thing you can set your watch to. It's that Breach is terrible on Haven. And he got nerfed and is even worse at the one thing that you might want to play him for to begin with. Don't play Breach on Haven. Anyway, moving on. Cypher actually struggled quite a lot, and that's quite interesting because last year, Cypher was kind of dominating. Maybe people now are just very used to playing against Cypher, and maybe you're not getting that same value that you once were with this agent on this map, but it's actually Killjoy who's kind of taken over. Again, part of this, of course, is to do with that Viper comp playing Killjoy most of the time. Vice also did, pretty well and might become, I think as time goes on, might become a bit more of a popular option overall. Jet, yeah, same thing, kind of those old meta comps. Jet's not the best option. Those are the stats for kind of the first 4 maps. We will get to the other 3 maps that were in the pool. We will talk about Icebox, unfortunately. And we'll talk about the overall data as well going into champs. But I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope this kind of illuminated the mind somewhat of what's going on in the VCT this year. But thanks for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow with more stats.